Hello, Internet! It's Wednesday Serial, and I'm back, and this time I wanted to talk about the cost of comics. It's something that was brought up in CCW, and it's something that I'd like to throw my 2 cents in about. So, as you've probably noticed, a lot of books are selling at $3.99 now, $4, and it's a big price jump from basically the $2.99, and it's a really big deal because prior, most price jumps have been about a quarter, and that's been the way it's been about as long as I've been reading comics, which puts you back to basically through the 90s. And so to just see such a dramatic jump for the regular price for a comic is kind of creating sticker shock and also affecting, how many books someone can pick up a month. And it's kind of disheartening to see, but at the same time, I hear that it's going to be the standard, especially across the big two, but it hasn't been yet. And what's interesting to me is what books still are $2.99. For instance, Avengers Academy just came out. That's $3.99. That seems like something they'd want to hook you in, maybe get a little cheaper at least to start. But then other books like Nemesis, which are this big deal, and the way it's printed and all, are done a little differently, and that's still $2.99. And as far as I can tell, since it's only 4 issues, hopefully would be all the way throughout. Also, you have books like Chew, which is by Image, and that's at $2.99, which is really interesting because most indies normally have been above, even if it is a bigger one or a property title. And so part of what I'm wondering is with this whole price jump, if it's going to create a more even market for some of the indies who have always been a little more pricey, which might have kept a few readers away, and now they might be more willing to make the jump to a different sort of title just because, hey, it's the same price, so you don't have that sort of wall keeping you out from a different kind of story. And something that's been brought up is a lot of people are finding different ways to kind of consume comics, and I mean, there's a lot more quarter bin or cheaper stuff for things that have been surrounding the comic shop, and people tend to wait for some of that if they're seeing a big pile of it sitting there in the new whatnot, or waiting for the trade, which is something that I do with certain books just because I prefer to read them in that collected manner. And there's a lot of sites you can get discounts on trades to a fair amount. I've heard some even up to 50% depending on what the trade is. And that's all well and good, but I mean, when the comics go up, so will the trades, and that's been something that's really notable, especially for Marvel. And that's something that I think, I mean, for a while it was more cost effective to buy the individual issues than the trades depending on the title, and sometimes it was worth looking at. And now with all this coming up, it might be time to reevaluate that again. Chances are trades might actually be cheaper just because that bound printing cost is maybe set it apart a little more. But you're also probably going to have to start waiting even longer for the trades. This Marvel model of releasing a hardcover and then releasing a trade paperback, so it's about half a year to a full year before you're going to be able to read the issues that you've been waiting for. And that's a sort of wait that might be really hard for some fans to make for certain books. Also, waiting for the trade has a tendency to kind of kill some smaller titles. I mean, I know there's some books at Marvel that actually got a lot of fanfare, and I'm pretty sure Agents of Atlas was one of these where people wanted to read the book, but they weren't hooked on it, they weren't buying it monthly, and they thought it was an interesting idea, but hey, I know it's basically being written for a trade, so why not wait for it? There's going to be that 6 issue arc. I'll just pick it up then. And I was one of the people who did that, and because of that, Marvel got the message that, oh, this book isn't doing well. And then later, I mean, and I can't verify the sales figures for that one in particular, but I know it's happened where it sells really well later as a collected volume. And I'm wondering if the market's going to start to address that a little more, maybe find a way to collect different stories and release more of a bundle. Like Amazing Spider-Man might have an opportunity if the price point becomes an issue or sales drop where, hey, we're releasing about 3 issue arcs every now and again. Why not just simply take those 3 issues, bundle them together, release it for notably more, but ultimately less than it would be for the 3 issues separately. Then you get a complete story in one collected edition, and it wouldn't be the trade or anything. It would just be that month's Amazing Spider-Man, which would be a nice thick bad boy with a fair amount of story. And I think because of the way it's going, the way that raising prices are going to affect the market, it might be time to look at a different publishing standard. To the other end of publishing, there's this whole idea of online publishing, and I know Marvel's made a big push for digital, but only with the Apple Store. And one complaint, tangent really quick about that, is why would they only do the Apple Store? It makes no sense for them to have brand loyalty to Apple when they could dramatically increase the amount of users of digital comics by simply going to the Droid market, just because there's other people on that market. And that just seems like a very bizarre business move. And also for me, as someone who doesn't use Apple products, it's kind of saying you don't get to use this product, which for me is fine because overall digital comics haven't impressed me, but it just seems like such a bizarre choice. But that being said, there might be a bigger push for digital comics. I know if a lot of indie creators, rather than trying to go to publishing and making it big that way, choose to do an online comic, and there's various forms and there's lots of different things you can do just because it isn't print, and that's great for them, and they're actually pushing the medium in a lot of great ways, and I'm all for it. And also taking older comics and republishing them digitally is being a big thing. I know Graphically is doing that, but one thing that gets me is a lot of those books are being sold for $2, which is about what they were sold for initially, or maybe a little under, maybe $1 under in some cases like Wanted. But what gets me about that is $2.99 for a digital right for a comic that in a lot of cases I already own is a lot to pay. And I understand, I mean, you need to get to the creators, you need to do all this, but because it's digital, there's no distribution cost, there's no actual hard publishing, so your materials don't cost as well. And the idea of where is this money going, what is it going for, is a lot to say when you're considering that really it's about as much as a comic was, and now it doesn't seem as bad because that's about a lot off. And I just think that it'll be interesting to see if more people start to transition over to that way. But what's really sad about all this developing and going online and buying from stores online and doing all this is it could make it even harder for comic shops that are already struggling to stay in business, just because they can't offer the deals because what they're trying to sell you is the week-to-week comic that's trying to be pushed out. And that'd be a real shame. I mean, a huge part of what I do every week is going to the comic shop. That's a huge part of my life, and going in and talking to the guys there and hopefully striking up a conversation with a fellow reader, just going about that. And I mean, that's where a lot of the community is built for comics, and if that went, I mean, it's just slowly creating a downward slide towards not the death of comics, but I mean a death of kind of the culture behind comics, or a dramatic shift that I don't think in any way is positive. I think this price point, the way it dramatically affects the market, is just so drastic, and I know that there's no way that these big two are going to say, oh, well, if we can make more on books, then why not do it? And there are enough people to buy it up front to make it worthwhile by sales figures, but I'm wondering if it will cause more readers to drop off, and if we're going to have a giant influx right now because prices are still at a good point, but as soon as that hits, sales slowly decline. We hit something like the 90s where the market just crumbles and you only have these hardcore buyers, and comics hit a weird thing where in order to find some of the more quality stuff, you really have to look around. And I'm hoping that that doesn't happen, and I'd like to see someone kind of take a step to see, okay, this is working now, but is this going to work long term, when all these people who figure they can just wait for a book or wait for a trade and find out that that's not going to be an effective way to get a book for cheap any longer, if that's just going to make a lot of it fall apart at the seams. So sorry, I know I threw out a lot of ideas there, but it just seemed to me that there was a lot more here going on than just $1 increase in books, so I thought I'd put that all out there.